Hey, greetings. This is Fred in Alaska. Been on some botched excursions, corrupted footage. Anyway, sorry for the delay in uploads. Been trying to accomplish some other things further north, and it just didn't pan out. And weather, of course, was a large determining factor as far as the rain and whatnot. But anyway, visit the website subarcticalaskasasquatch.com. There's a store there to help fundraise for the documentary. And what else? Nothing as far as that. What I wanted to share with you today was shared from Dan. Dan had an experience that's not the typical that we usually hear up in Alaska, and I'm honestly happy to hear it. And it kind of gives a different perspective on the aggression and a whole lot of stuff we don't know. And so this was back in the 70s. Dan at the time was a 10-year-old boy. He grew up near the Golconda River. I'm gonna remain vague because some of these things can be tracked back to the situation, and I don't want to put him out on blast because he asked to remain anonymous, so I'm gonna respect that. So he was, 10-year-old boy. He didn't have very many friends because he had just moved to the area. So he would go off into the woods by himself. And on one of his excursions, he was trekking along a trail, and he kept hearing something pacing him. And so, being a little, young kid or whatever, you get nervous and start moving a little faster on down the trail. Well, it came to a point where this creature paralleling him crashes through and cuts him off on the trail and comes out right in front of him, about 15-20 yards maybe away from him. He stated that he was scared to look at it. He had an overwhelming sense of dread, and turned around and hightailed it back to where he was, and it didn't follow him. So he got out of there on that, and about 8 months later, he was bored, being a young boy just wanting to explore. It had been raining cats and dogs. This was roughly in May, and again, this is roughly mid-70s this happened. He was just out in a t-shirt and jeans, and just hiking around or whatever. He got lost. I mean, he knew where he kind of was, but he was basically, lost. So as he's walking along, he had heard movement coming down the game trail and assumed it was wolves, and kind of tucked and hid, and was there for a little bit. But he was old enough to realize that hypothermia would set in if he sat still, because he was in a t-shirt. He was starting to get the chills. So he knew he had to get out of there. And this particular creek that he ended up getting onto the wrong side of, he couldn't find a way across it because of the swollen creek and the rushing water or whatever. Well, during this whole time, it had moved on into the next day, and him being young, there was immediate search and rescue happening. So he could hear sirens off in the distance. He could hear the spotter planes. He could hear all that, but there was no one saw where he was. So as he's going along, he basically decides, well, the only way out of here is if I put a log in the water and float down. Kid's reasoning, I'm going to float down the creek and get to a spot, maybe by this bridge or whatever, by the Richardson Highway, and, I can get home from there. And so, now grant you, hours had passed, and as he's going along, he's in a t-shirt and jeans, cold. He kept hearing sounds, damn near the whole time. He kept hearing, like, just off in the distance, things he couldn't see, couldn't account for. And he definitely was feeling watched. So he gets his game plan together, and he's gonna float. In his mind's eye, it was the best option to jump on a log and float down the creek and get out of there that way. So as he musters up what he's gonna do and whatnot, you gotta remember, it's raining, it's the creek is torrential, so he's basically taking his life in his own hands. And as he's about to commit to finding a log and getting in the water, this thing rushes out. This female Sasquatch rushes out, snatches him up, He screams and immediately almost passed. Well, he passed out, right? So he rushed with terror, passes out. This thing scooped him up, and he woke up hours later in one of the only dry spots underneath some foliage, underneath some trees and whatnot, next to the Richardson Highway. I asked him, I was like, well, what was your feeling about it? And he said, he was being honest. In 2020 hindsight, he felt maybe that because of the extra activity, the female just wanted to get him out of there. But he also feels there was an empathetic side, and it's not unheard of for a female Sasquatch to have saved a kid. There's several accounts throughout the states and what have you. But this is something that he didn't share with anyone. This happened back in the 70s, and it's basically just getting told now. There's a lot of people out there, some people even longer since they've shared what they've experienced just because of the ridicule. And I find it irritating that there is so much ridicule when it comes to it, because for one, none of us were there. But for number two, there's too many things that go on out in the woods that are unexplained. Several people I've talked to have been to places where they're just overcome with dread, an eerie silence, dread, no animal sounds, none of that. And man, it's aggravating from the standpoint of there's a lot of people suffering in silence right now. A lot of people. I know of people that have had experiences that I've been a part of, and they shut down over it. Even though I would never call them a kook, I was there with them. That would make me a kook as well. And anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys. It's not a extremely long, drawn out encounter or what have you, but it's definitely a change of pace from what I'm typically hearing. So I mean, I'm not against. I'm biased, so I can't. I'm trying to be open-minded when it comes to it, because I don't trust them for nothing. I don't know if I ever will. But hearing things like this gives me a little different perspective, because maybe he said maybe it was trying to get him out of there because of all the added activity, putting scrutiny on them, and maybe it was empathetic. And I'm hoping it was empathetic versus just, hey, let's get this little scamp out of here because he's bringing us trouble kind of thing. I want to thank Dan for sharing, because even though it wasn't some long drawn out epic type of thing, it's still hard for people to come forward with and share. It's just one of those things that just it's aggravating, because there's a lot of people that suffer in silence that self-medicate. And I speak from personal experience. I hit the bottle pretty hard for a couple of years after my experience, so I try not to pass judgment on that. But again, sorry for the delay in the videos. There's more coming, and I want to thank all the new subscribers for being here. I'll have this video up soon, and I have another experience from the Nushagak River to share after this one. And till the next one, y'all take care.